Good evening. I'm John Bailey. This is People to Be Heard, the program where people who have something to say have their say. And tonight, you've got Aaron Woodin, founder and president of PC Ventures in White Plains, New York, USA. And Aaron is on because he is in his 15th year of providing computer troubleshooting for the city of White Plains, and there are a lot of issues in computing, and that's why we're having him on. Sort of something completely different. Jim.
So, how did you get started in this? What prompted you to go independent to computer?
Well, there's sort of a long history to it. As it happened, by luck and happenstance, somebody a long time ago came across my name, rolled the dice, called me up and said, look, I know that you're going to be teaching an adult class about computers, but how would you like to come into my house and attempt a little repair project for me? And I accepted. And luckily, she was sort of a chatty Cathy and referred me to a lot of people.
Why don't I get clients like that, right?
It worked out great because she referred people to me, and then they referred people. So it was kind of like a network that sort of grew of its own accord. But it was a part-time adjunct to my existing IT job.
I see.
And then when I lost that job in 2002, I had enough of a client base to leverage and grow it into what it is today.
And you have an enormous track record of repeat business.
Yes.
Thanks to computer incompetence by the individual. Well, anyway, I thought possibly, could you tell us what the state is of personal computing today? iPads, laptops, operating systems. If I'm looking for a new computer today, what should I be interested in considering?
Okay. Well, just to rewind a little bit, the short of it is, I noticed the beginning of a sea change about 5 or 6 years ago, away from traditional desktop, laptop computing toward the portable devices. You know, you can do a lot on a tablet or a smartphone, and it seemed like the traditional PC environment was possibly going to disappear. But I think what happens is people realize that banging out long documents or a series of short emails over the course of hours is physically not very comfortable on these small devices.
Yes. Why don't you show us your iPhone? Do you have it on?
Unfortunately, I can't because my phone is back at the office charging. That's another problem.
Boy, they do not hold charges well either.
Well,
charge them every day.
That's definitely an issue. It's kind of regrettable that the battery technology has not kept up with the processors and the screens. What sort of happened, though, was that shift away from traditional computing toward the portable devices actually seems to have decelerated as people began noticing how relatively uncomfortable it was to do extensive amounts of work on the smaller devices. So luckily, that trend is sort of stabilized, and people are still calling me up and saying, what laptop should I buy, what desktop I should buy.
Right.
Now, unfortunately, when you go to a retail store, for the most part, the only operating system that you can get would be either the Mac OS, which is fantastic, but in the world of Windows, it's basically just Windows 10. What I experienced about 2 years ago were a raft of sudden and arbitrary Windows 10 upgrades that were getting slammed down onto people who had Windows 7 and Windows 8. And people reported to me that, you know, they were in the middle of doing important productive work and their work session was interrupted. They were given no opportunity to interrupt. To opt out. Yeah. And what's interesting is, in a lot of those cases, those machines became terribly slow, terribly unstable, and there was only a 1-month window that Microsoft gave you to undo that sudden change. And most people would, you know, they suffered through it for 4 or 5 weeks, and then they called me, and by that time, it was too late to undo the damage.
Too late. Right.
Yes.
In fact, I'm still working with Windows 7 because I refuse to accept their upgrade.
You brought up a great point.
Yeah.
I am telling people to do their darndest to get a machine with Windows 7. Apparently, at the retail level, for whatever reason, you can still get them at Micro Center down at the Cross County, and you can also call up Dell and say, I want a Windows 7 machine. Because I think Windows 7 at the moment is Microsoft's most stable and most polished operating system.
What? Well, we remember the Windows 8, the Windows 8?
Yeah,
Right.
Windows 8.
Right. Disaster. And now? Has this improved in the new machines that Microsoft is putting out?
Well, when I'm coming across the small number of people who are still on Windows 8, it seems like when Microsoft pushes down the updates, that the routine patches and fixes.
Oh, yeah.
Windows 8 seems to actually be relatively decent. Windows 10, when you buy it brand new and yank it out of a factory box and set it up, it seems to be relatively stable. But I still put Windows 7 above both of those.
Why is that?
You would have to ask Microsoft. I mean, there's something going on under the hood that makes Windows 7 much more reliable than the others.
Yeah.
Why is there this obsession with constantly upgrading systems and changing stuff? I mean, does it really always improve stuff?
They don't charge you for it. Yeah. What is the
Well,
Or you pay for it in other ways?
in aggravation? Yes.
well, Microsoft is really good at doing something I call believing their own propaganda. And they routinely fool
They're not the only ones.
exactly. They routinely fool themselves into thinking that their next product is automatically their best product. And it's kind of like what they say about the Star Trek movies, like every other one is a good one.
Yeah.
And that's kind of that's kind of how it is with Windows.
Yeah.
One's a debacle and the next one's great, and onward.
So, what are the key problems you are dealing with, since you are a troubleshooter by nature? What is the biggest issue that you are getting called on?
Okay, so generally speaking, all the operating systems are pretty stable. No one makes a truly bad computer anymore. So aside from a machine that was just born bad at the factory,
Born bad.
which does happen, but you also have people who are just holding on to computers for way too long.
Yes.
And the hard drive inside of these machines undergoes a gradual decrepitude. It's difficult to notice, but one day, all of a sudden, it might start up super slowly, or the applications will crawl along for no discernible reason. And
I get that. I know that feeling.
well, it's a very
Yes.
common feeling.
Yes.
And the right thing to do at that point is to back everything up and then start shopping for something new. I mean,
How often should you change a computer, do you think? Every 5 years? Or?
well, if you want to be proactive about it, you do it like once every 3.5 to 4 years. Or if you want to be reactive about it, literally as soon as it starts getting flaky and giving you trouble, just replace it. And here's why. If it ever does what's known as a hard crash, like the hard drive inside has a severe mechanical malfunction, you have to get a data recovery expert. In other words, people who have spent thousands of dollars on capital equipment and training to actually open up that hard drive and extract the data using special tools and techniques. It's a very expensive process for them, and it's certainly expensive for the end user.
Brain surgery.
It's in essence, it's brain surgery.
Yes.
With actually a higher success rate, though.
Not well. That's interesting, Jim.
Do you have any recommendations as far as email is concerned? For years, I used Microsoft Outlook, and then somebody that's working for me who had set up the thing with the password and everything had a memory problem, and it stopped working in 2013. And then I went to Gmail. Now, Gmail is fast, efficient, but they have this thing where they have 3 separate, I guess, boxes you'd call them. They ask you which is I find a real pain. And then, what do you do about that? Or do you recommend one email over the other, or do you like one better than the other?
Well, one of the good things about having an account like Gmail, AOL, Yahoo, Hotmail, which is also known as Outlook.com, is that they don't care who your internet carrier is.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So of course they don't care. It's just as long as the pipe is there, so to speak. Because here's what can happen. A lot of clients that I've known over the years, they'll switch their package. They'll switch their internet and television package depending on who's currently cheaper. And some of my clients have switched back multiple times. So guess what happens when you switch from Opt Online to Verizon? your Opt Online mailbox goes away. They kill that mailbox as soon as you've paid your final bill. Same thing with Verizon. You know, if you switch from Verizon to Cablevision or some other provider altogether, you know, once that business relationship is wrapped up, you lose that mailbox. And in addition, because of AOL's merger with Verizon, Verizon inexplicably decided not to be in the email business anymore, and you had to, if you were notified ahead of time about it, you were supposed to undergo like a special online process to migrate your account over to AOL. So by having something that's carrier neutral, you're pretty much guaranteed not to lose that email account.
Well, that's fascinating because AOL never told me about that. You know, but then no one ever tells me anything. That's it.
People have to realize, I mean, like end users have to realize that all this stuff is ephemeral. Devices fail, email accounts can go away. All, you know, just so prepare for the worst.
Prepare for the worst and careful. One thing we got to discussing for the program was this Dropbox mystery.
Okay.
Could you explain what a Dropbox is and some of the pitfalls in it?
Well, I personally feel that the idea behind Dropbox is pretty good. It's essentially online storage and online repository for documents, pictures, whatever you wish. The way that you share out of Dropbox, and this is not an attempt for me to in any way defame Dropbox as a product, but
understood.
But it's relatively unclear to me when you begin sharing it out how you selectively grant permissions for people to have access to certain things within that container. I think it's very unclear, and it seems like when you do share people through Dropbox, they don't simply acquire that item, it actually forces them to create their own Dropbox account. So it becomes kind of a marketing hook when you share your content from there.
I see. So one has to, your Dropbox content could go to many people.
Potentially could, and certainly there's potential to accidentally share the wrong thing to the wrong person.
Yes, certainly. Understood.
Well, that seems to be going on a national basis. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg's going to run for president.
Yes, well, speaking of the whole Zuckerberg phenomena, and what do you think net neutrality, the threat to net neutrality, how do you think that might affect the way you would use a computer? Is there a way to, does it mean that, as you were saying earlier, if you get someone that's net neutral, that is a better account going into the future?
Well,
it's yet to be worked out. Right?
Well, you know, as I understood it, the idea behind net neutrality is that, you know, it seemed to require government intervention to say that as a carrier, you could not prioritize different types of bandwidth. You know, so make of that as you wish. You know, the potential is always there for some of the heavyweights that are using tons of bandwidth, like Netflix, to sort of crowd that pipe, and people who are doing things like browsing Wikipedia or doing things that are their own, you know, sort of private usage or communications or research. Their bandwidth could potentially get crowded out by the big guys. So there's something to be said for some sort of enforcement of net neutrality.
Yes, which the FCC, the new FCC chairman, I believe, is really lobbying to do away with. And but as I say, there's no answer to that except just getting one of the major email providers.
Well, that is potentially helpful.
Yes.
To get one of the big ones, you know, because Gmail's part of Google.
Yeah.
And Google is, you know, the 800-pound gorilla of the internet, if not bigger.
Right. In fact, this week I read that the internet now comprises 20% of advertising revenues, more than television, which is an astounding fact, and it's not going away. Now, Jim?
What percentage would you say of the public has a really sophisticated computer knowledge? The computer users, I mean.
Not too many. I would say.
It's a relatively small percentage.
Yes.
You know, when I go to people's homes and the handful of small businesses that I go to, I do see quite the spectrum of comfort with the operating system itself and with applications. I think at this point there's tremendous application literacy. People at this point know how to write a Word document, how to whip up a spreadsheet, a PowerPoint document. They can surf the internet and get the information that they need. But it looks like homespun troubleshooting and problem resolution is still pretty much beyond their ken. I mean, out of the 1,700 plus people that I've dealt with over the last 15 years, I've literally encountered less than a handful of people who had truly stellar computer knowledge to the extent that they could resolve most of their stuff on their own.
So you're basically, it's like a car. You have to go to the mechanic.
Yes,
And,
it is a lot like that.
Well, I think the public's a lot more knowledge about cars than they are about computers.
Well, for sure. But on the other hand, I mean, you just don't have the tools to do that kind of work, let alone lifts in your backyard. So anyways.
Now, how well do you think that they'll be able to control, for lack of a better description, cybercrime? I mean, you have all these stories about them busting into millions of accounts.
Tremendous amount of scams, which is basically the three-card Monty upgraded to a computer.
Yeah.
You know.
The problem is that a lot of the ways in which my clients are either being scammed or attempted scams is that there's what I believe is called social engineering. You know, you're taking advantage of, you know, people see the world in a certain way and they have this sort of understanding of how their computer fits into everything. And then if someone calls them, you know, they're a scammer, but someone calls them and says, "We're from Microsoft and we detected a problem with your computer."
It's very subtle.
You have this normalcy bias and this automatic conditioning to believe them. The most common thing that I'm seeing right now, I'm getting panic calls about this constantly, is it seems like when people are on Facebook, every now and then, for whatever reason, a pop-up appears, a pop-up window appears in the browser and says, "You have the Zeus virus. You must call us because your computer is about to be locked or compromised." And here's what happens next. If you do actually call that number, you reach a bank of people on the phone, and they'll ask you to invite them into the computer. They'll pretend to do some productive work, and then toward the end of the conversation, they'll say, "Well, now you owe us X amount of dollars for repairing your computer, and oh, and by the way, if you give us a few $100s more via credit card, we'll you can sign up for our support package, and we'll continue to support you." Well, there have been variations on this for a long time.
I've never heard of that one, but you know, there is always, well, we have this upgrade where we have that, and your computer is sending out an awful thing, and we'll correct it for you. You have to do the, Microsoft says that.
Right.
And it's amazing.
You know, I like to use the vampire analogy. You know, a lot of it's the old saying that vampires can't enter your home unless you invite them in.
Yeah.
And it's it's the same thing with a lot of these computer problems. Viruses that just sort of automatically appear have become pretty rare. In a lot of cases, the users, in a way, bring it upon themselves, albeit that they're sort of manipulated into doing so. So this is the equivalent of like the vampire that's really crafty at convincing people to open up that door.
That's an excellent comparison. So, what are the main scams that you could inform our audience what to look out for today?
Okay, so make sure you disobey any pop-up window that warns that your computer is compromised or infected in any way. That's not how your legitimate antivirus software actually warns you. The other thing that seems to happen is when you do a Google search for like Amazon Kindle support or Canon printer support, scrutinize those first 5 or 6 search results, because for whatever reason, the phony tech support companies tend to come up first in the search rankings rather than the real company itself.
Wow. Whoosh.
Yeah. What I think is happening is the phony companies are simply paying Google to bump up their ranking to make sure that that's what people see first.
Well, Google does that too. You want to be number 1 on the page for White Plains, pay us this. I get promoted that, but since I already am number 1, you know,
well, we
it's
all know
not
that.
a problem. That's right. But all right.
I often get I shouldn't say often, I get calls every day from Google about your business listing is not.
Yes, that's true.
I get those too, and
I mean, sometimes 4 or 5 times a day.
I
really,
get that constantly. I don't think there's any way to stop it at the source. So if you're getting those calls on your cell phone, if there's a number that appears, just select block number at the bottom of the screen, and at least that number you won't hear from anymore.
Right. Speaking of, one thing that makes me interested about this whole fraud concept is, why isn't there any national clearinghouse, or why don't the police departments put out warnings about this sort of stuff? They do so very reluctantly, apparently. Is there a reason why they don't do that? Was there a reason there isn't a clearinghouse that warns about scams? It really hurts the companies.
It does. It's a mystery to me. You know, a couple times I've had to go to Hewlett-Packard's website recently, and they just actually had a pop-up window that actually says, if you've been called by a firm pretending to be Hewlett-Packard, please don't obey it. But, you know, I mean, talk about the horses being out of the barn. I mean, the horses are in the next county. And now we're seeing this warning. It's very bizarre how much of a lag there is between the prevalence of a new scam and the media's attention and the warning of the public about it.
Yeah, even phone scams or door-to-door scams. They don't tell you about them.
Well, talking about what you were just talking about with Hewlett-Packard, Verizon authorizes third-party dealers to sell their services, and it's getting incredibly hard to tell when you get a letter in the mail whether it's really coming from a real Verizon or one of its third-party. And I think they ought to outlaw that. I think they ought to say that Verizon must provide the service. Time Warner or Spectrum now must provide the service directly, and they cannot farm it out. I don't know why the Public Service Commission doesn't do that.
Well, since when has the Public Service Commission been interested in serving the public? Let's put it that way. But now, speaking about the cell phone jungle, do you have any commentary on cell phone product and where it's going and what people should be aware of? Since it is such a good part of the computer communications jungle.
Well, I think right now, smartphones have gotten so feature-packed and so sophisticated that I think that each new generation of phones are going to have such tiny incremental improvements that it does make you wonder that other than a phone just being flaky and acting strange, what's the real value in upgrading other than, I guess, just the status effect of having the latest phone? I actually did something kind of interesting. I have, I think, a 6S iPhone, and I had a 5C for a long time. There's nothing wrong with the 5C. I just wanted a better phone, and there was no trade-in program at the time. So when I took a vacation back in February, I simply used my older phone as a relatively expendable portable camera.
Right, in case it fell overboard.
And I actually witnessed a tourist on an excursion boat doing that very thing. He dropped his primary phone into the drink.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, if I had dropped my little 5C, I dropped a phone that I could replace on eBay for $100. And
well, actually, that's a good thing. You should have two phones.
It's never a bad idea because let's say that I did lose my primary phone. All I would have to do is somehow get in touch with Verizon, reactivate the old phone, and I would at least be able to make calls, get texts, get emails.
Well done. Yes. Well, a great new profit opportunity that the geniuses at these multi-billion-dollar companies haven't thought of. What happens if you drop your? That's a good ad, you know, but you never get one from that.
Well,
from them.
Another thing that's going on, companies are forget who it was. Some company, I don't know, it was a bank or what. They're going to drop their voicemail system.
Oh, praise be.
And
yes.
The thing that bothers me is you're never going to be able to get a person on the phone. You're going to get an email, or and you're not going to know what's going on. And we're getting further. It seems to me we're getting further and further away from being human.
Exactly. Everything done in umpiring assignments and officiating assignments in the county is done by email and going on the websites now, which is convenient, but you can't call somebody and get them right away for an emergency, you know.
What do you think? I mean, banks are pushing mobile banking all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's easiest to compromise a phone. And I don't know why they're doing that.
I guess and it's strange because it seems like banks continue to open up new branches, which is strange because everybody that in some sort of customer-facing business seems to be going in the opposite direction. So I'm not really sure what's going on here. On one hand, they're trying to push the mobile apps, but on the other hand, they're opening up new branches. Here's the thing: the pendulum is always swinging. And in the book Megatrends, the author talks about high tech versus high touch. And I think there will be a counter movement when too many companies and organizations are going in the direction of automating and removing human contact. It'll reach a breaking point, and consumers, the end users, will actually demand a return to being able to speak to a real human being.
Yes, it's a marketing ploy.
Here's the thing: it'll never go away. At some point, even in an automated system, some human has to intervene and make a manual change or a manual entry.
Yes,
So the key is, as a smart end user, as a smart consumer, is you find the wizard behind the curtain. You find the curtain, and then you peel it back and you find the wizard. It can take a lot of work, a lot of legwork to do it, but you will find that person eventually.
Yes, constantly calling and going up the ladder and all that, like trying to locate information from a press office. Yeah. So anyway, we have been talking with the wizard of computer technology in White Plains, New York, USA, Aaron Woodin. He runs PC Ventures. This is his 15th anniversary being independent. And believe me, freelance is a tough business. So he's good the last 15 years, and he's constantly growing. Over 15, how many clients there?
I would say 1,700 plus.
Ah, wow. Isn't that nice? A real business success story. John Bailey, Jim Benerofe, good night for people to be heard.